How's it going, everybody? Mason Dozier here with Kennesaw State ISA 4220 fall semester of 2020, and today we are going to be talking about operating systems and firewalls. So we'll start off by talking about what exactly an operating system is. An operating system is any software that allows a user to run other applications on a computing device. This is the most important software that runs on a computer and manages all kinds of tasks, including computer memory and processes. It also helps users access the applications installed on the computer, as well as a variety of other functions. OSs have evolved beyond just computers and are now part of other devices such as phones and tablets. They've also released a wide variety of operating systems such as Windows, Linux, Macintosh OS, Apple iOS for phones, and Apple smart tablets, and as well as Google Android for Android phones. One of the main functions of an operating system is to manage hardware resources such as input devices, so your mouse and your keyboard, output devices like a monitor or a printer. It also manages network devices such as modems and routers, and storage devices such as an internal hard drive or an external hard drive. Now that we've discussed what an operating system is and sort of what it does, let's talk about the main components of an operating system. So the most important component is a kernel, which is what gives the operating system basic control over all computer hardware devices. Some of the main roles of a kernel would be reading and writing data to memory, processing execution orders, and determining how data is received and sent. Another main component, which anyone who's ever used a computer is familiar with, is the user interface. And this is the component that allows for interaction with users. And this may include graphical icons on your desktop, such as the E for your internet, or it also may include a command line. The third main component of an operating system is the application programming interface. What this does is it allows application developers to write modular code for that operating system. Now that we've talked about generally what an operating system is and what it does, let's focus on some specific operating systems. The first one we're going to talk about is Windows Server 2019. This operating system went live in 2018 and was developed concurrently with Windows 10. It has a couple new features that weren't included in the previous version, such as container services. It also has new storage options such as Storage Space Direct and Storage Replica. It has new security features such as shielded virtual machines, and it also has an improved Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, or ATP. Another really big addition to this is the Windows Admin Center, which helps manage administrative tasks on the operating system. The next operating system we're going to talk about is Ubuntu 18.04 LTS, codenamed Bionic Beaver, and some of the new features that is included in this version that wasn't included in the last version is an updated kernel to the 14.4.15 based Linux kernel. It also has additional support for Linux security module stacking, the signing of PowerHost and NV kernels. It includes Queen's release of OpenStack, and it has a new network configuration via netplan.io. Now that we've talked about what an operating system is, what it does, and some specific versions of operating systems, let's talk about hardening your operating system. Now these tips are relevant for pretty much any operating system on the market. And these tips apply for whether you're working on a personal device or a work device. So hardening is the act of configuring a device or software securely. This helps minimize the OS's exposure to threats, and it also mitigates possible risk And when a device is considered hardened, it is secure as it can possibly be while still communicating with the outside network. Now let's talk about some steps to harden your operating system. The first big one would be service packs. Keeping up to date and having the latest version of your OS is integral for staying secure because each new version has patches to issues that have been found in the system that could cause a security issue. Now, it is important to download these new versions because hackers can find the issue with older versions and exploit them to attack your system if you're not up to date. So having these service packs helps you avoid unnecessary risk. Another hardening tip would be to remove unnecessary programs. Each program on your device is a potential entry point into your system for an attacker. So cleaning out any of these unused programs helps to limit the ways an attacker can try to get into your system and helps mitigate some of the risk of having those unused programs on your device. Another very important tip would be to limit user privileges. Users are often the most dangerous threat to any device. Limiting a user's privilege can limit the amount of risk a device is exposed to, and it also helps keep users from downloading unnecessary programs on the device by requiring approval for downloading new applications. Another tip is patch management. This kind of goes hand in hand with the service packs. Testing, implementing, and auditing patch management software should be done regularly to keep the OS secure. This will also help fix bugs in your programs and allow the system to run smoother. Using group policies is also a good idea because it defines what a group has access to. It establishes and updates user policies to ensure all users are aware of these policies and comply with them. This is especially important in a corporate environment. You can use a type of group policy called security templates, which is a group policy that can be loaded in one procedure and can be used many times across different departments. Continuing along with our hardening rules for operating systems, baselining is a huge one. What baselining is a process of measuring changes in the network, hardware, and software devices to create an average number called a baseline, which is used to compare with other measurements to determine when unusual activity is happening or when changes in your network has occurred. And this makes it a little easier to identify risks and even attacks on your system. Password management is also another tip I would include. A user should create rules to allow only strong level passwords, as well as rules that require users to update their passwords frequently. Old user expiration is another one. Users should set up and configure their operating systems to where if a user has not used the system in a certain amount of time, that they should be deleted, or if, especially in the corporate world, this is important because if you have an employee who no longer works for you, leaving their account active on your system may leave you exposed unnecessarily. So removing that account immediately after they're no longer with the company is very important to keep your system secure. And the last tip would be to back up your system online. This backs up the device's operating system often and stores the encrypted backup in an online location so it cannot be corrupted. This ensures that if your system is damaged or destroyed, the system can be quickly restored to operational ability. Alright, now that we've gone over operating systems, let's move on to firewalls. So a firewall is any device that acts as a perimeter for the inner network of a system. The main goal of a firewall is to defend network resources, validate external access to the internal network, manage and control network traffic, and log all events on the network. There are several different types of firewalls. We'll start off by talking about a stateless firewall, which watches network traffic and restricts or blocks network packets based on a source or destination IP or other static values, and a static value is a value that does not change. This is also known as an access control list and does not statefully inspect traffic. A stateful firewall is a network firewall that tracks operating state and characteristics of network connections. The main difference between a stateless firewall and this type of firewall is that it's configured to distinguish legitimate network packets from different types of connections, and only packets matching a known active connection are allowed to pass through the firewall. Another type of firewall is packet filtering firewall, which is a firewall used to control network access by monitoring outgoing and incoming packets and allowing or blocking them based on source or destination IP address, protocols, and ports. An application layer firewall is a form of firewall that controls input, output, and access by a certain application or service and works on the application layer of the OSI model. A circuit level gateway works at the session layer of the OSI model between the application and transport level of the TCP IP stack. So before we get into our specific firewalls and how to harden them, let's talk about some general firewall hardening techniques that anyone can use on any firewall on any system to help make it more secure. One of the big ones is updating your firewall OS. This helps ensure that all security holes have been patched and fixes any bugs in your system. This makes sure that hackers can't exploit your system using holes that the developer of your firewall has found out and fixed in an update, and it also helps fix bugs, which makes your system run smoother. Requiring strong passwords is also a good idea because your firewall password is one of the most important passwords on the network because it controls access to the network, and so changes made to the firewall can leave several devices exposed to threats. So making sure that password is strong and secure is very important. It's also important to make sure that they expire frequently to ensure that security is tight in the long run. Configuring safe remote access is also always a good idea because remote access gives your computer or gives a user access to your network from an outside source, and that can expose your system if you're not using a secure remote access technique. And the way this is done is by configuring the firewall rules to allow remote access only to authorized individuals operating on secure networks. And that helps avoid any threat of intruders gaining access or intercepting that signal and gaining access that way. And that last tip kind of goes with the next one of hardening firewall rule bases. The rule base is how the firewall determines who and what is allowed to access the network. Some useful rules to employ to secure your network is to block ports that are unused and commonly used by attackers, and ensuring users have access to necessary areas of the network only. It's also important to make sure that you maintain this rule base because a lot of times they can be changing frequently, and you got to make sure that all the rules have a purpose and are frequently updated, as rules that are unused may leave your system exposed unnecessarily and can lead to unnecessary exposure and issues with daily functions of your system. Now that we've talked about some general tips for hardening firewalls, let's talk about how to harden our Windows 2019 firewall. So anytime you're talking about hardening a Windows firewall, you should talk about the Windows Security Configuration Wizard, which is a GUI tool which is pre-installed on the Windows OS that will scan the system and help inform users of any risk in the environment. Like we talk about in the general rules, managing port access is important to keeping your system secure because ports act as a doorway in and out of your device. So managing these doorways helps ensure your system is not left unknowingly exposed. And like we talked about before, it's always a good idea to back up your system frequently. That way, if your system is exposed or something's damaged or corrupted, then you can restore your system to an operating ability quickly and easily without losing too much time or data. Another tip that I would include for Windows Firewall is encrypting all non-domain communication, and this makes sure that the device does any communication that the device does with an outside network will be encrypted, helping to protect from unwanted users having access to information that's being communicated. and make sure that any data that's being shared between devices is secure. Another really important step to hardening your Windows firewall is to set up network logging. What this does is it tells the firewall to log all network activity, and this helps identify risks or attacks and better protect the system. It also is important to frequently monitor these logs so that you can detect any unusual activity within your system and make sure that it is fixed in a prompt way. All right, now that we've talked about hardening our Windows firewall, let's talk about hardening IP tables. IP tables is the firewall that's used with the Ubuntu operating system. And one of the main tips I would suggest is enabling SE Linux. And what SE Linux is a security-enabled version of Linux, or a set of kernel modifications and user space tools that help provide mechanisms for supporting access control security policies, including mandatory access controls, or MACs. Again, restricting and monitoring ports is important, even in IP tables, because this is a way to ensure that no unknown entry points into your system are left open and can be exploited by attackers. Again, like I said, for the Windows firewall, the rule set is the instruction manual for how firewalls operate. So if this gets confusing or unnecessarily long, it can cause unwanted risk by leaving your system exposed without you even knowing it. And it can also bog down necessary tasks. So if you have a rule set that's blocking something that you need to do every day and you didn't even know it was in there because their rule set's so long, then that could be a problem. So keeping this clear and simple, and also keeping this updated, is important because it helps make sure that all the rules have a point and are used commonly and keep your system secure. And lastly, network logging. Like I said before, it keeps track of all the network activities and helps users identify suspicious or unusual activity that might identify a risk or an attack. And by having this enabled, it helps you identify this suspicious activity and mitigate the risk of an attack and fix the problems quicker and more efficiently. All right, and that is the end of my presentation. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next week.